Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Illumineers Quest podcast, where we talk everything Lorcana. I'm Zach.
I'm Jacob.
And thanks for coming on this journey with us. Okay, so we're revisiting another Chapter 1 episode. We're doing the ink ranking / ink type tier list, but with a little bit of a twist this time. We both watched a video this weekend from, I think, one of the bigger YouTube channels from the community. Shout out Zepha. He's also really high on the Pixelborn ladder, and he talked about kind of the different ink types and how to think through them. So we were planning on doing this anyways, but I think that very much has impacted the way that we're thinking about this moving forward.
For sure, it brought some new strategies and overall strategies and decks to mind that I haven't really thought of before. It also solidified some of my previous opinions, which is nice. That yeah. I was kind of. You kind of, backed up some of my opinions, which is great. But I'm excited to get into it today.
Yep. So with that said, that's going to be the main topic, and we'll get into it. And as always, if you're listening to the audio version, we appreciate it. But we've also got our YouTube channel where we do unboxings and other content for video form. And you can follow us at Illumineers Quest on YouTube. You can follow us to shoot us notes on Twitter /X at LorcanaPod. And then you can email us questions and comments at lorcanapod@gmail.com as well if you have any questions or concerns you'd like to reach out to us about. So, again, as always, thanks for everyone that follows. And if you're only following us on a few channels, that's where we're at across the board. So with that said, and where you can reach us and listener /comments, we got a good one this week to talk about. First time responder. Doug has said he's been listening to us from the beginning, though. So, Doug, we appreciate the support, as always, with everyone else. But we wanted to address your question. His question is revolving around Kronk in Steel.
Junior Chipmunk.
Yeah, Kronk Junior Chipmunk. Thank you, Jake. Kronk Junior Chipmunk versus Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. So, for a quick recap here, they have the same stat lines on the surface. Mm-hmm. So they're 6 cost inkable with 4 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 2. The difference comes where you get into their abilities. Both have the ability to deal 2 damage to chosen character on banish from a challenge. The difference, however, is that Tinkerbell does the 1 damage when she's played. So when Tinkerbell enters play, she does 1 damage to the whole board. And Kronk has resist +1. So that's the difference there.
And there's even a bigger difference is that Tinkerbell's a Floodborn, so she shifts for 4.
You have the shift, yeah, and I was going to mention that too, obviously, when it comes to cost and being able to do something right away, I guess. But so you have, but the biggest just straight stat from that is just resist +1 for Kronk, and you have the 1 damage dealt to the entire opponent's board on play for Tinkerbell.
I don't know if you mentioned this, but they're also both in steel.
Yeah,
so they're the same ink.
I said that for Kronk, but yes, they're both steel cards. And so, yeah, on the surface, his question was, why is Kronk not really been talked about much? And I think on the surface he's right. The stat line's really much the same. Kronk does have much better staying power. I think from, again, my opinion, and I'll start here and then you can give yours, is that any card with on-play ability, and we've said this a few times, I feel that on-play abilities are usually the most impactful way to change a game, because it's going to trigger. Anything like Maleficent, Monstrous Dragon is going to trigger because she's being played. Or, Lady Tremaine and Ruby now, it's going to be played when she's played.
And obviously there's a few exceptions. There are a few exceptions like Hero Outlaw, for example, that does not on playability. Again, one of the best cards in the game, though.
Yeah, but in a generality, anything that you can do. Yeah, so the fact that Tinkerbell can come in and do damage on play and, open up that, ability to then start to clear a board really helps. And when I think about where that really comes in to have a bunch of impact is evasive cards. If the 1/3 Minnie Mouse Surfer, stylish surfer card from now that's evasive, that's starting to gain some traction. If you are doing grab your swords plus Tinkerbell, that's 3 damage, she's gone. With Kronk you don't get that.
You'd have to banish 2 cards with Kronk to take out that mini, for example.
And the other big scenario that comes to my mind is the super hyper aggro deck that's out there right now, and then just in general, the aggro decks, you've got your 1/1 Lelos, your 1/1 Pinocchios, and any cards like that only have one willpower that are just dead when she comes on the board.
Yeah.
Kronk doesn't have that at all, and he will banish 2 of them next turn. But let's say you have Pinocchio, the 2 ink, 3 Quester, and Amethyst, and like a Lilo, on board. When he's played, they both quest next turn, and he takes them out. But that's a 5 lore difference based on that one ability.
Also, a big thing is like with being an on-playability is like you play down Tinkerbell, everyone gets 1 damage. Okay, she's drying. If you didn't shift her in, she gets Dragonfired next turn. If you do that with Kronk, he doesn't have an on-playability to do an effect immediately. Like with Tinkerbell, it'd be like, okay, at least I got that 1 damage spread on everyone before I got taken out.
Yep.
But with Kronk, he's just kind of drying, hoping he survives, basically. Now, what I do think is interesting, and maybe a little bit interesting of a play, would be playing maybe 3 Tinkerbells, 3 Kronks, to maybe get both of that situation a little bit. Maybe just being a constant, like, maybe it'd be your opponent be scared of putting anything exerted.
Yeah.
Because he'd deal some heavy damage.
I definitely didn't think about that. So I don't think they're necessarily a replacement of each other. With the stat line would suggest that. To me, Kronk's more of a challenger. Obviously, Tinkerbell you want to challenge because she has an ability when she banishes 2. But I think, again, she's more of an on-play damage dealer and then, tries to take out people's board. I think if you think about, like, Steel, like, their main job is challenging, I think of Cinderella. So to me, it's more of, like, a Kronk-Cinderella story. I could be completely wrong in that, but that's my perception, too. And, Cinderella quests for more. She has resist +2, and she shifts. And so to me, that's the other option I think that you could take to remove a card to put him in. And so I think it's a much harder decision to take Cinderella out versus Tinkerbell. But
for sure. I mean also there's a few ways where you could like if you're playing maybe Rapunzel, maybe steal Amber, you could, I believe, does it say deal damage to chosen character? Okay. Does Tinkerbell say the exact same? Okay.
Yeah.
So, you could damage your own cards to heal.
Yeah. I think there's viability, especially like if you don't have 4 Tinkerbells.
If you don't have 4 Tinkerbells, it's huge, yeah.
I think it's there. I think just the on-playability and the shifting of the Tinkerbell and Cinderella are the biggest changes. Or the biggest, like, uplifts that you have on why you would play Tinkerbell/Cinderella over Kronk.
Also, like, a big detriment, I think, especially probably down the line, is that it doesn't have any keywords, really. It has Storyborn and Ally. So I would kind of hope that maybe it would have, like, certain keywords that would help it down the line. I don't know, like...
Yeah, that's not looked at very much today, you're right. But,
I think it will come...
We see a pirate thing coming up. There's definitely a villain/princess thing that has kind of bubbled up a little bit. So that is a good point, too. Okay, well, Doug, thanks for the note to us.
And thanks for listening from the beginning, dude. Thank you so much.
I hope that helps, or at least gives us our thought process through some of this. But okay, with that said, card of the week. I think it's my week this turn, and I've picked Mufasa, Betrayed Leader. He is a Amber card. He's one of the legendaries from Amber this go round. He's a 5-cost inkable, 3 strength, 3 willpower, quests for 2. Which is all fairly basic stat lines. But however, his ability says when this character is banished, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, you may put that character in play exerted. Otherwise, put the card on the top of your deck
For free.
Yeah, for free. Sorry, that's kind of critical there. You get to he basically replaces himself on the board, and we talked about this on the card tier list. And we said we might look back on this and regret it. Mm-hmm. Well, this is on here because I played against him, and it really, really shot me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, we have kind of a history with Mufasa as well. Since our openings, we have a little bit of a
got a ton of them. Yeah. So, the reason I chose this card this week is, one, I think it has been a little overlooked. I think there will be a big meta play for him at some point, and I think it's starting to bubble up. In League this past week, I played against a Mufasa, and the Mufasa was banished, and what replaced Mufasa? Lady Tremaine. So imagine that. You banished Mufasa. I think we traded based on the damage on my card. I don't remember the exact scenario, but I think we traded, and then he played a Tremaine off of it, and then I had to get rid of another card. So it was basically like a 3-for-1 shift, because I had 2 removed, he had 1 added. Mm-hmm. So it's just insane. I mean, again, I've played against it a couple times on Pixelborn where you get like Stitch New Dog or something that doesn't really mean anything added to the board. But in the cases where something is added that is incredibly game-changing like that, it changes the game and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just like, it has to be 5 cost. It can be a Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, for example. I don't know.
Yeah, he was running those too, so it could have happened.
You could have a 9 cost come in at around turn 6, turn 5.
Yeah, that very well could have happened too. So, so that with that being said, I think I still want to have him worked into a deck somehow. I love the Ruby Amber deck that was played against me. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I mean that's a good one to be on the lookout for. It's a really cheap legendary. It's under $10 for sure. I think it's like in the $6 range.
Yeah, I was
gonna
say 5 to 6.
And so if you're looking for some cheaper alternatives from a singles front to get for Amber, it's a good place to start.
I also would expect it to rise maybe in the coming weeks.
Very well could. It's very well could. Okay. News / recap of our week, or anything else that's on our mind. I kind of just started to touch on mine. We're going into the last week of league. I guess the only thing I can add to that before I let you talk for once is going into the last week of league. I think we're both top 4, which is kind of the cutoff for the top prizes of our league, and so we're trying to finish strong and get there.
Yeah, I mean, I believe I finished top 8 last season in our league, which I got the pin, which is all I really wanted. So that was cool.
But you missed like a month too for being too busy, and so that's really good considering the time commitment that was missed.
So yeah, I mean, I think hopefully we're gonna be able to finish strong here. It's been eventful for me. The league has been. I'll do a league recap here.
All right. Well, it's your thought. I mean, I'm done talking. Your thought. So your go. You can take the floor.
Well, so I'm in the middle of figuring something out. So I play the extremely meta Ruby Amethyst bounce, and I'm not it's not my own version of the deck. I copied someone else's complete meta championship tournament winning deck.
Well, we're not very good deck builders yet, so we have to take the ideas from others and then understand that and go from there. So no shame in that.
I started this season with a new deck, but I finished off with this. And I lost 0-3.
That was I meant to ask you about that afterward because you told me that, but I didn't ask why. What do you think? What did you learn from that is going to help you next week?
So one thing I did learn is that no matter what kind of game you're playing with this deck, it's going to be competitive no matter what. And I played against three completely different decks, or maybe. So I played against a challenge bounce Ruby Amethyst. So you got your Shere Khans, your Queen of Hearts, but then regular bounce cards. Then I played against a Popsicle, and then I played against your Steel Song.
Yep.
Which those are all kind of around the same kind of meta deck, so I didn't lose against anything lower than that. But I mean, I don't know. I think it might be me. I'm not sure. To me, I had all the right strategies. They were all close games. I feel like. I don't know. Something just wasn't working out that night.
Okay, well, that's my challenge for you this week. Is then if you lose one, you got to really think hard about what you did wrong to try to.
One thing is that I will say this: I was drawing cards too much. I was playing way too many card draw cards.
You definitely did that against me.
Instead of playing helpful cards. One thing I need to work on a little bit is what I ink. I think those are the two main problems.
Okay, well there you go. That's a good thing to work on then, and be really mindful of it. And it's hard, in the moment of the game to just like make decisions and not be like super mindful about it, especially now that there's a timer on the league. But yeah, I mean, I think those are both good comments for people to think about too. Is be very mindful of what you're inking. Thinking 2 or 3 turns ahead. But yeah, so I think that's a good place. And then yeah, next time we record, we'll have the first month done, and we can recap on where we finished for the first set of the new split. So
yeah, it'll be a good time.
Well, with that said, that kind of does lead us into our main topic of the day, which is the meta inks / ink rankings. And so gonna tackle the topic a lot different this time, because I want to talk like high level first, and like what makes good inks and why certain ones are better.
So I believe, just to comment on last time, I believe we did a tier list, ink tier list, and we're gonna be doing it a little different this time.
Yeah. So with that said, again, I have to give a shout out to Zepha on YouTube. If you haven't watched him or you don't follow him, you definitely should. He is very much a student of TCGs, and what I mean by that is he's very smart and very good at like brewing up new ideas and new metas and new decks. And he had like a really long thought process on like what's working and what's not, and why certain things are better than the others. And so of the 6 inks, he said there are basically 3 S tier that you have to have at least one in your deck, or you're kind of just donezo. And I pretty much like solemnly agree with that. And then when you think about the 2 strongest decks, they're both comprised. Well, if you think about like your Ruby Amethyst, it's comprised of that. So without further ado, to start off with like the quote S tier, or the top inks, it's Amethyst, Steel, and Ruby. And so the main thought behind it, and I completely agree, is that they have different packages within their ink types that are basically irreplaceable. So the first one with Amethyst we can start with, because you play it, and we can kind of touch on some of the stuff that you've already mentioned and we've talked about too. It's the most controlling. It has the most kind of tools as you go through. Even thinking back to last chapter, you have a ton of card draw. You have a bunch of spells to get card draw from like chapter 1 with Magic Mirror and the Queen. A lot of that's been replaced with the Merlin Mem bounce package. His stance, and I'm again using his words in this and not ours, because I think it's very well said and important to think through, is that all of the bounce package cards are overstated. And what he means by that is like the willpower and or the strength of those bounce package cards, meaning Mem Snake, Mem Fox, Merlin Goat, and Merlin Rabbit are the 4 like core bounce package cards. And between those cards, they're completely overstated, and they have extra benefits too. So like, a 3/3 card on turn 2 is bonkers. Yeah.
And that's one strategy I like to talk about too. I have not been using that nearly enough.
I notice you ink it a lot, and you got it. It's incredibly powerful. So the downside, and why we weren't like super onto it at first, and I think the community as a whole was kind of on the same line, as like thinking that the bounce would be a big detriment because you're removing your cards. But the lines kind of open themselves up now. Like let's say you're playing Ruby Amethyst. There's a lot of uninkables in there, which is okay in that regard because you have a ton of draw capabilities. So if you play you play something on turn 1 that's inkable, like Pascal or Minnie Mouse, the 1/3, or Olaf, or any of those like 1/3s that are in Ruby and Amethyst, then you might not have a bunch of inkables later on to keep your inking and progressing to get you to like turn 3, turn 4, where you can play your Maleficent and your Merlin or your Merlin Rabbit. But now you can just bounce that card back and then ink it your next turn. And so the bounce isn't near as much of a detriment as we initially thought. So that's why I think Amethyst is incredibly overpowered. You have the bounce package with all of the abilities, the gaining the lore, the drawing the cards, the bouncing important cards back, to keep them from being vulnerable. So it's just insane. And so I'll let you get your comments on the Amethyst one now, because the bounce package, that like S tier bounce package, that's all that needs to be said.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year it was, or not last year, but last chapter, it was more like a supporter type. Like it was, it was card draw. It also had Facilier, which was, mainly supporter type cards. It even had Mickey Sorcerer in there with the brooms. So it played a lot different, like, than it is today. So that's one thing to look at. But as far as where it is now, it really is. Whoa, we just dropping things?
No, go. Sorry, I will stop fidgeting. Go.
Really, it's all about Sword in the Stone now. Like, if you're playing Amethyst and not playing Sword in the Stone, you're doing something wrong.
That's correct.
Arthur is. I like to say he's a key part of the bounce package. Arthur is probably one of my favorite cards in the game right now.
There are two different lines. I mean, Arthur definitely tends to be more of an aggressive line of Amethyst. But yeah, he's definitely in there with an importance as well. So,
especially he's able to return a card every turn, which to that deck is very important. To try to most of the time get a card back to your hand every turn, especially if you are running out of inkables. So it, like Zach was saying, gets inkables back into your hand that you already used. Overall, I love Amethyst. It's probably my favorite. Like, I'm not saying it is number one, but it's probably my favorite ink.
Well, you've said that from the beginning, and so you picked well.
It's pretty awesome. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Okay, and so moving on to Ruby and Steel. I want to combine these two because it's kind of the same theory as to why they're good, but they approach it in very different ways. Mm-hmm. And so the theory or the reasoning behind it is that their removal is the best in the game. Yeah. So Steel has a ton of direct damage between Fire the Cannons, which seems a little bit of resurgence this set. You have Grab Your Sword, you have Smash, you have the new songs, Strength of a Raging Fire, Let the Storm Rage On. You have Tinkerbell, which we already talked about.
Kronk, if you want to add him in there.
You have Big Cinderella, which I'm throwing in because she has the ability to deal damage to unexerted characters when songs are played, and so you have that synergy with the Amber Steel. And then the new songs that were added, and so the amount of just like direct damage cards you have in Steel is really, really oppressing and can be very hard to get off the ground early game. And can put you in a really big board rut and lore rut. On the other side, it's really straightforward. Be prepared. It might be the strongest / best card in the game. It's by far the biggest board removal / game reset tool that's available. Be prepared is just nutty. It can't be matched. I mean, if you're playing against somebody that is playing Ruby, you have to be ready for it because after turn 7, the game completely changes. They have the control in their hands after turn 7 with Be Prepared. But on top of Be Prepared, you have Dragonfire from set 1. You have Maui from set 1, who is as strong as ever, especially when you consider the bounce package because you can bounce him back and heal him after he goes in and does his challenges. And then I've left the most important for last, which would be Lady Tremaine. We already talked about Lady Tremaine as well, but Lady Tremaine, can be a ward counter because your opponent has to choose the person to banish, and so if you only have Cusco on board, then he's gone. Yeah. The amount of just direct removal you have in Ruby then is really, really high as well, just in a little bit different form. And so the board control / removal that those two inks give you is incredible. And so that's why you have to have one of those two in your hand, is because they give you the tools to control the board state as you progress through the game.
Yeah, they're vital. You got to have, I would say, probably, direct removal, not just direct damage, I would say is a little bit more advantageous.
Ideally, I think they're different. They're played at different states in the game. Your direct damage is turns 1 through 5 usually, and your direct removal is usually turn 6 you get to Lady Tremaine, and then turn 7 Be Prepared.
I would even say turn 5 Dragonfire, then on from there. You
have. Obviously Dragonfire is a big one too. It's been replaced pretty heavily with Lady Tremaine, and so I think that's it's kind of the split there. And then obviously after 7 you get to Maleficent Monstrous Dragon at 9, and so the hits just keep on coming. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, they're a little bit different, but they get you to the same goal of getting characters off the board without you having to challenge, and then like trading where your cards are removed as well.
For sure.
So those are like your S tiers. Like if you're building a deck, it's, I don't want to say a must that you have to have one of those. You know, again, like you can play decks that aren't super meta and have fun and build a cool fun deck, but those are the tools. You know, card draw, the bounce, you get a bunch of lore from that. You also have spellbook, which we didn't mention, that, you know, you exert 1 ink to gain a lore each turn, and so there's just a lot of tools to continue your questing / lore gaining throughout your play. And then the removal is obviously important to keep your opponent from doing what they want to do. So if you don't have one of those, you're going to have an uphill battle for sure, is what we're getting at.
Yeah.
So that's like S tier. Like if you're really, you know, if you're new or you're, you know, trying to like rethink what you want to do, those are the 3 that I would start with. You know, and again, I mentioned like the Ruby Amethyst is probably the best, if not the second best deck in the game at the very least. And it's got it's got 2 of those colors in it. The second one would be Amber Steel. That one's a little bit of an anomaly with all the singing. It can really ramp up. But yeah, so getting into the other 3, we have Amber, Emerald, and Sapphire left. My next one, when we haven't really discussed this far down yet, but my next like tier or next like, you know, ink would be Amber. And I think you still have a lot of the tools from the first set, and that have been enhanced a little bit too, to make this one even stronger. You know, so we've got Mufasa that we talked about. You have the Steel Song package that has gotten even stronger. And so that deck / you know, meta has gotten even better. And so I think Amber's the best because you have healing with Rapunzel still. You have card draw with Surfer Stitch and Rockstar Stitch, and all of the other, you know, direct damage dealing that you can do through the songs. And then the ramping that you get from the singers. You know, you can sing on turn 4 with Ariel. You can sing on turn 3 with the Queen. I know we talked a lot about the Queen, but I think in general, when people think about Amber Steel, like the Queen isn't the top of mind, but she should be because she's that good. So yeah, Amber's my next one.
It's mine as well. I think, and like you just mentioned with the Queen, there's even a little hidden strategy within the Queen. If you play, now I'm gonna forget the card.
World's Greatest Criminal Mind. I know where you're going because that's what your brother likes to do.
Honestly, it's a really good strategy, but the way it works is that you actually add 4 strength to your opponent's card, and then more than likely it has at least 1 strength, so then you'd be able to banish it with World's Greatest Criminal Mind.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a pinch, that's, you know, a fantastic way to do it.
And it's a way to get direct removal without playing Ruby, which is kind of cool. Like, you're able to work that in.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, Amber, it's interesting to think Amber is not one of the top 3, because I think definitely last chapter it was top 3, I would say, and probably took Steel's place, or maybe even Amethyst's place.
I think it's because it's kind of in that support realm that you meant for, that you said with Amethyst, you know, how it was chapter 1. I think it's kind of in that range this time. Like, the Steel Song is incredibly strong, but it's nothing without Steel. If you don't have Steel, which we've already said is the S tier one, then Amber is nothing, because you don't have all the songs, you don't have all those direct damage abilities to do all of that with the singers. So I think it's the supporter in that Steel Song deck, and even though most people may not think of it like that, that's probably why. So
can I say, I just want to say this, like, I like Steel a lot, but I don't know if I think Ruby and Amethyst are kind of a step above.
I think that's fair.
I think if I were to say it, it would be Ruby Amethyst S, Steel A, maybe Amber B.
I would say all 3 S and then Amber A still, because like you still have Amber Steel that's, you know, might be the best deck in the game.
I understand that, but I don't see Steel outside of that. I don't see Amber outside of that. You know?
Well, we don't, but there was also the deck that Zepha mentioned in the video that's the new up-and-comer, which is Amethyst Steel.
True.
So
true. I mean,
but we all have our own opinions. We can disagree on that slightly, but the point is top 3, Amber next. I think we're probably going to agree on this. And so, what is your next one after Amber?
So number 5.
Yeah,
Sapphire.
Okay, I unfortunately agree.
So main reason is Popsicle. Like, I'll just say that. The main reason for it being 5 and not 6 is Popsicle. It is basically... So it's replaced Amethyst in the realm of straight card draw. Like, Amethyst is the king of having and keeping a bunch of cards in your hand. But in terms of just straight card draw, Sapphire's replaced Amethyst, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's Flaversham, that's Popsicle, that's Nick Wilde, that's Judy Hopps, that's all those guys. That really come into play there.
Yeah, I agree. I am unfortunately, because that, spoiler alert, that puts Emerald at the end, which I'm a huge fan of and would love to work with better. But yeah, I agree. I think the big knock against Sapphire set 1 was obviously the card draw, and you just said, and I agree with it, might be the best card draw engine in the game now. Mm-hmm. And so you have that's gone by the wayside, and so you can really ramp fast with the ink abilities that Sapphire gives you, but now you have the card draw as well, and so you can pair with like a Ruby, which you get the Popsicle to do all of the removal that you need to continue going. You have and then an engine to keep it spinning. So I agree. I think Sapphire is good. I think when you get into the nitty gritty, there's like you mentioned, there's like 5 or 6 cards necessary to like make that engine hum. And so that's like the one knock on why it's lower and it's not S tier, is you have to have Popsicle and Flaversham and Nick Wilde and Judy Hopps and probably another item, on board to make sure that if you don't draw a Popsicle, then you're gonna have an item on board for Flaversham on turn 4. And so that's like 5 or 6 cards that you're incorporating into that draw engine, where with Amethyst you just need Maleficent and Rabbit, and obviously you throw in Friends on the Other Side, but that's still just 3 cards. So anyways, yeah, that's why I think it's lower tier. But anyways, yeah, that's my thoughts on Sapphire.
I mean, obviously there's a few, there is an completely built-in Sapphire item deck. Like you have your Tamatoas, your Maurice. I believe the Sapphire Aerial as well. Is that?
Yep, and then obviously Flaversham to draw with it.
Yeah.
So
all those cards on top.
I mean, there's theoretically a line where you banish an item with Flaversham when he quests, and then you quest with Tamatoa and bring it right back. I mean, technically that could work. Obviously, I think in real world circumstances it probably wouldn't be quite like that.
But it's there.
But it is possible.
It is there, and if that's you're all about that, it's there to play.
That would be insane.
And which I think it'd be a fun deck to roll one time,
Yeah, it for sure would be. Okay, so unfortunately that leads us to our last and final ink type, which would be Emerald, and it pains me to do that because in an ideal world this would be my favorite. I mean, it can still be your favorite. It is my favorite. It is. Actually, in a perfect world, it would be fantastic because it's my favorite. That's a better way to say that. I think the main knock against it, and you and I will both agree on this too, is the uninkability. There's just so many cards.
And like you said, that's the number one thing. That's the number one thing that keeps it. But here's the problem. If all these cards that we're going to talk about were inkable, then it would be unstoppable and way too OP. And that's the problem, is that it really doesn't have a middle ground.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if there was some sort of middle ground, or maybe a couple of them were inkable or something, because Genie on the Job, Cusco, Mother Knows Best from Chapter 1, you've got like kind of those 3 core, which I like to play still, and I still play in my discard deck that I use with Emerald. On Chapter 2, you've got Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, which I haven't even gotten to play, which I said was one of my favorite ones when we started this, and it still is one of my favorite ones. Like, I think that would be a fantastic card to play. You've got Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, which is uninkable.
Boo Emerald?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You've got Prince John, which is also uninkable, which is obviously the engine of the discard. You've got the new Flynn Rider that quests for 4 if your opponent doesn't have any cards, also uninkable. You've got Lucifer, which is played in and out a little bit. He discards 2 cards from your hand or 1 action card. He is also uninkable. So there, and that's all the one. I'm trying to think if I've missed anything from Chapter 1. I'm going to look back at this real quick. But yeah, so when I talk about all those Chapter 2 ones, there's just no way to really build out a cohesive deck with all that.
You say Cusco, right?
I did say Cusco, yeah. I mean, and then even like I said Mother Knows Best. Do It Again for some of the mill type stuff if you wanted to get into that. The only other one I might mention would be Lady Tremaine. And then one that I've wanted to play forever is Mickey Artful Rogue, but it's just uninkable. And again, when you think about the abilities there, it's just impossible to get all of those into a deck. And so you have to be so selective on like what you're trying to do that all of that inkability has like really fractured the deck that you can build around an Emerald one. And I didn't even bounce, bounce one of your characters to your hands to remove one of your opponent's characters. Like, again, that to me should be inkable 100%.
Yeah.
But it's really, really, really hard because you have to have so many other tools, and you can't put all the Emerald tools into one deck like you can with most of these other ones because there's so many uninkable.
I think it would be a really interesting mechanic to see a card that somehow could turn uninkables into inkable, and I think that would save.
That would be nutty.
This ink. And I don't think it'd be super OP because you'd have to have that card first of all, and I think it would be uninkable within itself.
So, like, if that card is in play, like, turn other uninkable cards inkable?
Yes.
I mean, that's a crazy mechanic.
While it's exerted, turns uninkable cards into inkable. Something like that.
I mean, we're going to have to write that down for our Chapter 3 wish mechanics and hopes, because that's a really good thought.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see, and I think it would save Emerald.
Yeah, I really, again,
That's just me speculating.
Emerald's my favorite, and I say that because I think there's just so many different strategies you can go down with Emerald. You have the discard strategy with, Prince John and Daisy Duck and all of that engine. You have the aggro strategy from like Chapter 1 where you've got Hans and Cusco and Chapter 1 Flynn Rider that quests for 2. And all of the, kind of like put a bunch of pressure on tools. You've also got like decent removal tools with bounce, with all the bouncing to kind of keep the board clear and put a bunch of pressure on your opponent because they can't ever get anything dry. You've also got like the Cheshire Cat, which I, again, incredibly love. Exert to banish damaged character. Think that's fantastic. But there's just so many stipulations to everything. It's either uninkable, or it has to already be damaged to exert to remove, or you have to remove one of your own cards too, like bounce, or you have to have Prince John on there to draw off of when discarding. And so there's so many stipulations to like everything. It's just really, really hard to get anything going.
I think the biggest thing for me with Emerald is that there's missing pieces. There's a lot of missing pieces. Like there's somewhat of a built, like there's bones of a damage deck here, but there's nothing to deal damage. You have to play steel, basically.
We both tried to get one of those working.
You have Cheshire Cat from the Shadows that deals with damaged characters, and then you have Beast Relentless, like a legendary and a super rare. Cheshire being a 8 cost, and there's nothing there to help them. You have to play steel, and that's coming from experience from someone who tried to make that deck.
mean, and you didn't even mention Ring the Bell, which is shockingly inkable. But Ring the Bell banishes a damaged character. But again, I think there's like, we said with Sapphire, there's like 6 cards.
Pack Tactics as well is another one.
There's like 6 cards that you have to like make that engine run. Where with like Amethyst, it's 2 or 3. With Steel, it's basically 1. Like each of those individual damage dealing cards is its own engine because it deals the damage. It's just when they all bundle together, it's insane. Same thing with Ruby. Like Maui's an engine of its own. It's going to direct remove by itself. Be Prepared is an engine of its own. It's going to remove by itself. And so it's just hard to get all of those strategies that you need 4 or 5 or 6 cards to like really make hum. Because the lines that you have to play, like if everything lines up, like I can say this from personal experience. When the discard deck, when your lines, meaning like turn 1 I play this, turn 2 I play this, turn 3 I play this, when the cards that you want to play each of those turns you have in your hand and you're able to continue inking, when that works, it works.
It's the most satisfying thing and works, yeah.
But the problem is you have to have those 3 or 4 turns perfectly mapped out. And if you don't have those 3 or 4 turns perfectly mapped out, then you're in. It's not like, oh, I can kind of work through. It's like you're in trouble.
And that's why all these other inks rank so high is because of the versatility.
I think the flexibility, flexibility of it is insane. So I think that kind of finalizes my thoughts. I mean, again, I like the thoughts on those first 3 being the S tier ones and everything else kind of being under that. And I would even say, I don't know, we can disagree on this one, but I would say so. Like we already kind of did, I guess. But the first 3 S tier. So you've got your amethyst, you've got your ruby, you've got your steel in S tier. And then under that, I would say you've got amber A tier. Under that, I'd say you have sapphire B tier. And under that, I would say you have emerald C tier. That would be my ranking. I don't know. Again, you could probably do that a little differently if you think differently. But that's kind of the way that I think about it.
So I would have ruby, amethyst S, steel A, amber B, and then sapphire and emerald in C is how I would.
Yeah, I mean, so we're definitely like have everything on the same rank. Like from 1 to 6, we think the 6 are the 1 to 6 are the same, but where we would kind of put the viability of them, I guess, is a little different.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense too, because just a little anecdote here, I was trying to get a sapphire emerald like brew working. I thought it'd be really fun to do like kind of Cogsworth. To give everybody resist. You have a bunch of ward as well in Emerald with Cusco and Pete and like Bucky and Prince John. And then you give them all ward, or then you give them all resist with Cogsworth, and it makes it really hard everything to remove. Then you've obviously got a ton of questers as well. I thought it would be like really fun to like make it impossible to remove everything pretty much. It just took so like I just named 7 cards, and you have to have all of those 7 cards in play for it to work.
Yep.
And so it's just, it makes sense. So once I saw the Zephyr video, I was like, it just like a light went off, and I was like, this makes perfect sense as to why this isn't really working that well. Because there's just the tools that you need aren't readily available to you at all times.
And I saw this analogy, speaking about Lorcana, is that like there's cards in, like I'll just say Amethyst and Ruby example, that are toolboxes within themselves, and then stuff like Amber, Emerald, and Sapphire are tools. They don't have everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it too.
But there's a lot of other cards in Amethyst and Ruby that just have that whole package already built into the single card.
Yeah.
And that's what hopefully Chapter 3 will give us, is Sapphire, Amber, and Emerald upgrades.
Well, I mean, I've already seen a bunch of people brewing on the location possibilities. I can imagine a location in Emerald where if you have people there, anybody at that location has ward. Like, that would be bonkers.
So, and that's one thing we haven't talked about too, is like, there has been an update since we talked about locations last.
We probably should have mentioned that off the rip.
Probably.
Okay, so if you're hearing this, we will already have said it. We'll go back and edit this part in at the beginning. But yes, right after we recorded the last one, they did do a Discord call and they clarified all the locations.
And how they're going to work.
Yeah, and so the clarification is that a symbol that we didn't know, one of the theories was correct, which is the cost that it takes to move a character to said location.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is that it is limitless for the characters you can move to that location.
Yeah.
So, for any location. It's not... I mean, there might be an exception where it's like you can only have one here. But as far as we know, it is limitless for how many cards you can have on one location. Which is another thing we didn't know if that was, maybe 3 at one location. But I believe there's something else with the lore too. Was there? That
you get the lore from the location on the set phase of Ready, Set, Draw. So yes. You do just get that lore every turn. So it's like a spell book, or it's like a flute, or it's like any of those other direct lore gaining abilities, except you just do it and you get it. And it's crazy because you don't even have to quest. Like the location that we saw, it's 2 cost inkable, and you play it and it's got 6 willpower, and it's probably going to get you 2 lore.
I mean, I would say even 3 maybe. Like, it would consistently
just from being there. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty nutty, and I think that will completely change the game.
And from what we've heard, locations will have abilities as well, like you mentioned.
Yeah, so locations will be a big one too, and obviously things will change in the future again, I'm sure. But my wish would be, as we kind of like reflect on these tier lists and where we are, and this might be for a deeper conversation for further on, but at some point I would like it to like really reset. Like, I don't want a Ruby Amethyst 3.0. And I don't want a Steel Song 3.0 when Chapter 3 comes out. Like, I want the meta to completely different. Like, I want those decks to just be nerfed into the ground by something else that's released that's so much better. Like, I don't want to keep playing the same thing that's modified. I want to play something completely new.
I mean, I think my hope would not be for those to go completely into the ground. My hope would be for every ink to have an even deck. Like,
Well, yeah.
I don't think I necessarily want Ruby Amethyst, a deck I've invested a lot into, money and time, to be completely nerfed to the ground. I'd like it to stay up towards the top with multiple other newcomers.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, and that's more what I mean too. Is just have the viability of other inks. Whereas you have an S tier and then everything else, and so.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that any last thoughts on ink types or tier lists or chapter 2 ink type tier lists?
No, I mean hopefully this one will stand the test of time a little better than our last one.
I would imagine so, because we're basing this off of one of the premier minds of Lorcana, not just ourselves.
So basically what we're saying is if this doesn't age well, it's his fault.
Yeah, our hands are clean this time.
Yeah.
Like we're good to go. But no, again, shout out Zepha on YouTube. If you haven't checked him out, please do. He's really smart and has helped us in a lot of the thoughts and lines that we have and that we play. So appreciate the insight there. And if you have any questions, again, as always, please shoot us a note or let us know so that we can get to as many of those as we can in future episodes.
All right, I like this conversation a lot. It was a good time.
Yeah, I think so too. So as always, again, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
See you guys.